Hello, I'm Dallas Grove. Welcome to Hometown History, a show that brings the history of coastal Monmouth County to life, sometimes through the stories of its people, and sometimes through the exhibits and happenings of the Township of Ocean Historical Museum. This is the Eden Woolley House, the museum's home. It's a fully restored 250-year-old structure that's an open door to history. These galleries and exhibits and a year-round calendar of events that open the door to our regional past.
The Ocean Township Historical Museum's display rooms are filled with items of interest for all ages. We have items from historical America and historical Ocean Township. We have old school chairs, an early American fireplace, old dress-up clothes, and a lot more of interesting memorabilia.
We invite you to check out our website, oceanmuseum.org, and come see for yourself. Our volunteers, and we are an all-volunteer organization, are waiting to greet you. But right now, we invite you to join us this episode of Hometown History and consider bringing us your own story.
My name is Gail Levenson. I'm from Belmar, New Jersey. Today is November 21st, 2014. I'm sitting down at the Ocean Township Historical Museum with my mother as the first guests in the museum's Family Stories project.
I'm Florence Harris, and I'm 91 years old.
Her family came from Russia. And what were your grandparents' names?
They were Barnett and Miriam Resnick.
And where did they live in Russia?
They lived in a little town near Minsk in Russia.
And what was the name of the town, the village?
Molovets. And I dare you to find it on the map today.
There were 7 children in your grandmother's family.
Right.
Who came to America first?
Her son Max. He came to America because he was being forced to join the Russian army. And at that time, I think it would have to serve 20 years. And so he ran away to America, where he worked, and then sent money over for his younger sister, Fanny. And the two of them worked, and then they sent for their third one, Bella. And they all worked together and saved money to send to the family, for all of them to come to America.
And about what year did they come to America?
I would think about 1909 or 1910.
And how old was Grandma Anna?
She might have been 9 or 10 years old.
Okay. And there's a story that you always tell. Our great-grandmother was called Grandma Bubby. And there's the story of her crying fire.
Yes. When the 3 elder children sent money back home for the family to come to America, my grandfather got the letter. And he opened it up, and he saw the money there. I guess it must have been a money order. And read it, and he didn't want to come to America. And he took the letter and put it under the cushion in the chair that he was seated, and that was it. And my grandmother was furious. A couple of hours later, she ran into the room where he was sitting and yelled, "Fire, fire, come on, let everybody out of the house because we'll all be burned to death." And he grabbed his book, always with a book, and ran out, and she ran to the chair and took the letter from the under the cushion. And she said to him, "I'm going to America with the children. You want to come with us? You're more than welcome. If you don't want to, you stay here, but I'm going."
Wow.
And so he came with her. And that's how they got to America.
Do you know anything about your father's family?
Very little. My grandparents were gone by the time I was born. And shortly before World War II, the bulk of them moved to California. And with the war and all, we just sort of lost track. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah. Where did they come from in Europe?
His family came from Austria-Hungary.
And when did they come here?
Must have been about 1880, 1885. And you can tell they were from Austria-Hungary because their first four boys were named Herman, Leo, Maximilian. That was three, I don't know. But you knew that they were from Austria-Hungary.
And when your grandparents came here, where did they live and how did they support themselves?
They came and they moved. They didn't settle in the Lower East Side the way a lot of Jewish people did. They moved to Brooklyn because that was where some people from their old town lived. And they knew them, and so that's where they moved. The older children supported them. My grandfather's nose was always in a book. He was always studying. And my grandmother was the moving force in the family.
He was a Talmudic scholar,
He was
right?
a Talmudic scholar, yes. So all he did was study the Bible and the Talmud and the Torah and make babies. And the older children supported them.
So you lived through the Depression,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a story about your grandmother and.
Oh yes, during the Depression. My father taught her how to make bathtub gin because she always made wine and some other prune wine, and Slivovitz, which I understand was very powerful. And he taught her how to make bathtub gin, and she'd sell it to the people in the synagogue and for other purposes also. And in order to get rid of the mash, she'd leave the house at 12, most likely at 12, 1 o'clock in the morning, carrying a sack with the mash on her shoulders and go blocks away and dump the mash in the sewers and come back. She was quite a lady. That's the way she helped support herself.
And what is your most enduring memory of the Depression?
Well, my father didn't work for about 2 or 3 years, and he hid in the house most of the time. We were on home relief. That was what it was called then. And one day he asked me to take his shoes to the shoe store. He had been wearing the soles where there were just holes in them, and he would put cardboard in the shoes so that he could wear them. But it finally got to a point where the shoes are irreparably damaged. They were just worn out. And he gave me this pair of shoes to take to the store because he was too ashamed to go to the store himself and let the people see that this man was home during the day. And he said, get the same pair of shoes, and I don't know where they scraped the money together. And I did. I went to the store and got exactly the same pair of shoes, and I don't know how long they lasted, but it was pretty sad. I cried on the way to the store.
How did you meet Daddy?
My friend Beverly babysat for her aunt, and she had 2 little cousins. And she was babysitting them on one Saturday night. And she said to me, I've asked Arnold, a friend of hers, to come while she was babysitting, and she asked him to bring a friend for me. And the friend was my husband. And I was about 15, and he was about 16. And this happened for quite a while. We'd meet babysitting, and they'd then go to a movie. And then he came to my Sweet 16 party. And from then on, that was it. But we were both very young. Very young.
Do you know anything about Daddy's family? We were always very close with them, with
Yes,
his brothers.
yes. You know, I don't. I think he wasn't born here. I don't think.
His father?
His father was not, no. And I think they came from England. Because where would a Jewish family's name be Harris? It must have been something else, and it was changed.
Mm-hmm.
And his mother family came from Poland. But both of them spoke completely without accents, so I guess that they were very young when they came here.
Daddy joined the Marines to be in the Drum and Bugle Corps.
Have some water, please. When he was young, he attended some sort of event that the Marine Corps Bugle and Drum Corps were marching, and that really impressed him because he played the drums. And so he decided that he was going to join the Marines and be part of that, which he did. He joined the Marines when he was 18 years old, and went to boot camp and then to music school, where and then wound up in the Marine Corps Bugle and Drum Corps, and was stationed in Washington, D.C., and marched at all the formal events that the Corps usually did. And he achieved his goal at that point.
There was one very interesting thing that Daddy did while he was with the Drum and Bugle Corps.
Yes. President Roosevelt used to go to Warm Springs, Georgia, for his illness, or whatever you want to call it. And the Bugle and Drum Corps used to send a contingent down there along with him. And so Daddy went several times to Warm Springs with the Bugle and Drum Corps contingent, and used to tell me about how badly crippled Roosevelt was. And it wasn't very apparent to the rest of the country. We knew that he had had infantile paralysis, and we knew that he was crippled, but we never realized, the country really never realized that he couldn't walk, and that he was being supported by his son most of the time. And Daddy told me how he used to get in that pool and swim back and forth all the time, and how he loved it down there, and all the people around loved him. And he was a wonderful, wonderful man, and it was a great experience for him. He thought about it really often.
Well, what year did Daddy join the Marines?
1939.
And you went to Washington to be with him. Tell me about that.
Well, the government put ads in the papers for people to take civil service tests, and I did. I took a typing steno test, never thinking anything would come of it, because I was working at the time. And I was working 5.5 days a week and making $5.50 a week, which seems, I can't believe it right now. It was incredible. Anyhow, I took the test. And after the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor and we declared war, a call went out for everybody who took these exams to come and work in Washington, which I did, and willingly too, because my husband was stationed there.
He wasn't
He wasn't my husband then. And so I went and got a little room in a house in Washington, and I worked there. And about a year after I moved to Washington, we got married.
And how old were you?
When I went to Washington on my own, I was 18 years old. And we got married, I was 19, and he was not quite 20, and he had to get his parents' permission because he was under 21. I can't imagine that being true today, but it was then.
And when did he go overseas?
He went overseas, I think, about 6 months. Must have been in the middle of 1941.
Right, and
No, must have been after 42. We were married in 42. And he was overseas for 2.5 years, and was in Guadalcanal and all that. But after the fighting, because I don't know how this happened, but he wound up as an MP. And never in the fighting, always came afterwards to clean up things. So we were lucky in that respect.
And what did you do during that time?
During that time, I shortly before he was sent overseas, my father died. And I moved out of Washington back home to Brooklyn to be with my mother because she needed me. And then shortly after that, he went overseas. And I worked. I worked during the war. And he was overseas 2.5 years. And when he came home, I moved out. We got our own apartment and started our life.
And what about children?
What about children?
What about children?
What about children? Well, we were married for close to 10 years, and I couldn't conceive. So we decided that we were going to adopt a child. And at that time, I was working for the VA in the neuropsychiatric department, surrounded by psychiatrists and psychologists. And I went to the Stephen Wise organization in order to go through the throes of adopting a child. And it took me 2 years of investigations and visits and agonizing meetings with social workers. And the psychiatrists and psychologists there at the hospital told me exactly how to answer and what to say. And after the 2.5 agonizing years, we were okay. I received a phone call saying that they had a baby girl waiting for us. And we went and we picked her up, and she was 3 months old, and she had blonde hair and green eyes.
Not me.
And absolutely adorable and wonderful. And that's my Margie. And we took her home, and she's a wonderful, wonderful child.
So how did I come to be?
And when Marge was about 2 years old, we went on vacation for the North Shore of Long Island. And we were completely relaxed, and I became pregnant. And there you are.
And who told you?
That's the story.
And who told you you were pregnant?
My sister-in-law Doris. I didn't know I was pregnant. It was an impossibility. But those things happen.
And who did you tell first?
I told my brother-in-law, because I called him on the phone. Everybody was working, but he wasn't. So I called him on the phone, and you never heard such a noise in your life. Both families were just absolutely incredibly happy, as we all were. And she turned out pretty good.
When did we move from Flatbush to what I remember, the apartment in Canarsie, Brooklyn?
Yeah, when you were about 2 years old, and Margie was about 4. And our apartment was too small. It was a 1-bedroom apartment. And so we moved into city housing. And it was the best move I ever made because it was only a block from the water. It was a lovely apartment. And everybody in the building was in the same boat. We were all young couples with young children in a protected area. And it was absolutely wonderful. Ask Gail, she remembers that.
Yeah, it was a great childhood.
Yeah, it was a good experience.
Well, you were a great mom, but I know you also had a career.
Yes, I did.
You worked more than didn't. You stayed home for a few years.
Yes, yes.
But you did have a career. Why don't we tell something about your career path?
Yeah. I worked for an organization known as Citizens Committee for Children. And I started as a secretary, not a secretary, a stenographer. And I wound up as the office manager. I worked there for 17 years. The organization was founded by Eleanor Roosevelt and another woman called Trudie Lash. She was the wife of Joseph Lash, who was a great friend of Mrs. Roosevelt. I don't know if you know the history, but he was a great friend of Mrs. Roosevelt. And it was a marvelous organization stationed in New York City. And they cared about children, were interested in children. And that's what the organization was about. And they had different branches, welfare and health, and they watched the government very closely, and they were close to the people in the city who ran the city, the mayor, and it was a wonderful, wonderful job. very interesting. And I worked there for a long time. It was good. Very exciting.
You did have one job after that also before you retired.
Yes. I got tired of traveling into the city. We lived in the suburbs at this time. And so I left the Citizens Committee. And then my husband wasn't feeling well. And so we have a very large hospital out on Long Island. And I took him to the hospital. And while he was waiting to be examined, I said, well, I'm going to walk around. So I walked around and I walked past personnel. And I saw they had ads up that they needed help. And so I decided to apply. And I got the job. And it was to the one of the officers of the hospital. And it was in the neonatal unit. I couldn't think of the word.
Yeah.
In the neonatal unit. And absolutely fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. And I worked there until I retired. But it was a very, very interesting position.
So, what is the most important thing that you have learned in your long life?
I don't know. Love your family. My mind's a blank.
And any advice for your children and grandchildren and your one grandchild?
No, work hard and be honest. And I don't know, be good to others and yourself.
Well, thank you for doing this interview, and thank you from my family, and goodbye.
And my pleasure.
So-